It's 7 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. There are two things on the agenda. First, we'll review and hopefully approve the minutes of last month, July 17th, and then have a public hearing in regard to the application for variance from the Wentworth. Why don't we take the roll call? You have everybody who's here. Okay. Then I'll ask that we review the minutes and ask if there are any corrections or changes to the minutes from last month. Does anybody know who the other man is?
No, I noted, I saw that, I was wondering about that.
You remain unidentified. Okay.
He's the guy that had the owner also on. I can't imagine nobody knows who this was.
I don't know. I have a motion then to adopt the minutes. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, the second agenda item is an application from the Wentworth for a variance. This is a public hearing, and then we'll close the hearing after deliberations. And I'd like to just make some comments first. This is a variance. This is a request for a variance from our zoning ordinance so that a building can be built higher than our 35-foot limit. To grant the variance, the board looks at 5 criteria. If the applicant demonstrates that he meets those 5 criteria, we must grant the variance. If he does not, we should not. It's not a question of whether or not we think it's a good project or not. It's whether or not those criteria are met. The 5 criteria include the variance is not contrary to public interest in the spirit of the ordinance observed. And that's largely in discussing those criteria, we're looking at the essential character of the neighborhood and how that may be changed. And is there any threat to public health, safety, or welfare? The third criteria is substantial justice is done, and that's weighing the loss to the individual, in this case the applicant, for not doing this versus the public benefit for complying with the zoning ordinance in this specific case. So it's a weighing of those, that loss and the benefit and public benefit. The other 2 criteria is the value of surrounding properties will not be diminished. And the 5th one, and one I suspect we'll spend most time talking about, is that literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. And that is measured by looking at whatever special conditions exist at this property. And again, weighing the hardship because of those conditions versus the public good. So with that, I'll open the public hearing. The way this works is the applicant will have an opportunity to present his request for a variance, and then other interested parties, abutters, or others with a direct interest in the case will have an opportunity to talk. First, those in favor, and then those in opposed. The board will be able to ask questions throughout that period. I'll emphasize that just because you're maybe a resident of Jackson or a neighboring town doesn't necessarily mean you have a right to speak. You have to have some direct interest in the case. And I also will try to keep the commentary on point. There's no point to have discussions about things that are outside of our purview. For example, whether or not the project would be, let's say, built with union labor, or whether or not the project has an impact on a historical district or outside of what we consider. And I'd rather not, in fact, we're admonished not to have that kind of conversation for fear that somebody may think that it is a factor in our decision. Any other comments from anyone?
No, I think you covered it.
So at this point, I'd invite Fritz and Claude or whoever to come up and let's just walk through what the project is first, and then discuss the variance application. And I think, go ahead, Claude.
All right. Well, my name is Claude Pigeon. I am a senior project manager with Couture Construction. My relationship with the Wentworth Resort goes back some years. We did the Fair Lawn for Fritz a few years back. My presence in the town of Jackson goes back considerably further than that. I did an addition to the Jackson Elementary School about 22 or 23 years ago, and we were the builders for the Inn at Thornhill. We did all the Robert Sears project at the Nestle Nook, and just across the town line we did all of Nordic Village as well. So we've had a pretty strong presence in this community for almost all of my working career. So that being said, we certainly have our fingers on the pulse of the community and a good understanding of how the community thinks and what the community's needs are. So when we were first approached by Fritz, it's been a few years actually. This has been sort of, it's an idea that's sort of fomented and churned and is finally moving towards some kind of fruition. But Fritz basically has a 130-year-old building that has in many ways become obsolete and certainly has not come to par with the needs of the modern hospitality industry, and especially Fritz's specific plans to improve and offer good quality product to the traveling public. And so he also has kitchen and other facilities that are outdated. He has conflicts of circulatory patterns that are not in the best interest of his help, his kitchen staff, and his other staff, and also his clientele. So it's his sincere interest, basically, to improve some of those circulatory conflicts, as well as add some good quality stock to his product line, and somewhere along the way do something that he feels will be a major contribution, a significant contribution to the community. So that basically is how we started and sort of the impetus of this project, basically. And so what we have is a building that will hopefully match or be allowed to match all of the lines of the existing hotel. The existing hotel is only slightly higher than what the ordinance allows. I believe we're looking at, what, 6 feet? 40 foot 6 inches to the main ridge line, and then we have a couple of towers basically that go to 45 feet 9 inches. But basically the 40 foot 6 inches is the bulk of the building. If we consider the total building volume, that remaining 6 feet or so basically is in the hip of the roof, or in the framing of the roof. And so by the time you get up to that last 6 feet, you're talking about a very small amount of cubic footage, and it actually represents considerably less than 4% of the total building volume. So
Is that 4% of the addition?
the 4% of the building addition. That's correct. So just so that you can see better, this dotted line represents the 35-foot limit, and this solid line, of course, represents our intended ridge line. And looking at this building.
Actually, could I ask you to show it to us as well?
Oh, I certainly will. My apologies. Yes. So this line represents the 35-foot limit, and this line represents, of course, we're looking at a two-plane representation of the building. If we were looking basically at a 3D model, we would see that in fact there is a very small amount of building represented by the difference between the dotted line and the ridge line. And that is somewhat visible by looking, again, you know, these two mansards basically are pretty much the area in question. And as I, without being repetitive, is about actually 3.2% of the gross building volume. And because of our desire, basically, to make this a seamless addition to the original building, we would like to accomplish that. It would be to our advantage if we could follow existing eave heights, existing ridge lines. That will help us make this addition look like it was part of the original hotel, which is really what we would like to do. It's in keeping with, certainly with Fritz's intentions. It's also in keeping with the flavor of the town. I know we're not supposed to address historicism as an element, but on the other hand, the ordinance basically is here to protect certain aspects of the village, and we fully think that the plan as we proposed it will have almost no negative impact, will have absolutely no negative impact on the flavor of the village. The public interest, basically, if I understand the reason for putting the 35-foot limit in, is to protect from some kind of an urban rise, basically, and you know, you have lots of shadow, lots of darkness, interference with lines of sight and views, and none of those problems will exist with this addition. First of all, we have a property that is surrounded by spruce trees that are 85, 90 feet tall, perhaps. And so if you do a 360 walk around of the existing property, there are actually very few access points where you can even see through the spruce trees to see where the addition is going to be. And the further you get away from the property, basically, the more that is so. In those few areas where you do have a break line of sight through the trees, we're basically rising as we move away from the building. So before you get very far away from the Wentworth property itself, you've already risen to a point where you're looking right over. So there really is no vantage point that I've been able to find that is going to be affected in terms of view beyond. More looking towards the west. But even if you're over on the other side, looking the other direction, looking east, because of the trees and the way we're going to situate the property, it's just not going to have any visual effect whatsoever.
If I could, just where the addition is being placed, maybe you could
Yes,
take the
I'd be
plan
happy to.
and comment on where the porch is now and what's happening.
We have a footprint of the existing hotel, and this is the existing Thornycroft building, and this is the existing maintenance building, and dining room spaces, and then of course the main body of the hotel. And so what we have done, basically, it worked out more by coincidence than anything else, but the line represented by the back of the utility building and the line represented by the furthermost point of the Thornycroft building actually define our new building parameters. So we are staying within a footprint that is already established by the existing buildings. And again, we are coming up to a point where only a small amount actually rises above the 30, in terms of volume, only a small amount rises above that 35-foot limit. So that's the existing plan. Main body of the hotel, the Thornycroft building, maintenance building, and we're intending to site the new addition within the boundaries spelled out by the existing buildings. And on a slightly larger scale, here we have the porch and the dining space. We will take great pains at Fritz's insistence to keep the planters and the veranda that we have here and incorporate it into the new building. So from the pedestrian's point of view, given the pear tree that you have here and the building parameters that we have, the pedestrian experience is going to be almost totally unchanged just because of the foliage and the trees and the nature of the design. So that is basically what we're, in terms of the building massing, what we're hoping to accomplish relative to not only the existing hotel, but the footprint of the existing buildings that will be taken out.
Does anybody have any questions about what's proposed at least?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Two presentations today. This is the dining space, the continuous veranda that comes around, and we will leave this veranda in place and basically use this as our building line to go back to the line defined by the back of the maintenance building. So in terms of footprint, we will be staying within an established footprint as well.
Can I ask about what living space is above 35 feet elevation?
There will be no living space above the 35 feet elevation.
So that's just...
If I may, let me just...
just roof trusses and so forth.
Yeah, let me just do a very quick...
Just yes or no.
Okay, well, we'll have our trusses more than likely 24 inches on center, and the truss design will have a small space out of the middle with a continuous bottom chord, and that will create hopefully about a 12 or 14 foot wide corridor so that we can run ductwork, some electrical conduit, and some other services basically through that attic space, and we'll have a few windows as is shown, kind of dormer type windows into that attic space just to provide some light and ventilate the trusses. But no, there will be no useful space other than mechanical chases and horizontal duct chases.
Just to add on to that, is there, what does code require if there's no human beings living there, but you've got ducts? So there's smoke detectors and fire?
Oh yeah, the
Fire stuff up
sprinkler
there?
system will definitely have to extend up into the trusses. It will more than likely be a dry system in the trusses, and we'll have to have all the necessary fire separations, not only between the attic space and the unit below, but also in between the units as well. When we get into 3 stories of hotel occupancy, the demands of the code become pretty rigorous, and so there'll be a lot of fire separations. As a matter of fact, the addition itself will be separated by firewalls and fire doors from the main body of the hotel, just required by code, basically. And
Go ahead, Dave.
Earlier you mentioned the kitchen, circulation in the kitchen.
Yes.
And modernizing it. I haven't heard an explanation of what's involved with that.
well, basically, what we want to accomplish is, the kitchen is sort of expanded and grown, and it's a hodgepodge, for lack of a better word or a technical word. So The hodgepodge is becoming harder to deal with as time goes by. And we've got storage in buildings that are not connected, not congruous to the main body of the building. So staff people have to, go outside and either get dressed to go outside and come back, or, it's just, they also have, even for basic facilities, for their own convenience, they have, some issues with access, and, it's, nothing is contiguous. So what we want to do basically is to improve the flow of materials into the kitchen area in terms of the receiving dock, have some contiguous storage spaces, wine room. So basically, it will be unnecessary for anybody to leave the building for any reason other than to get in the car and go home. And also, the kitchen itself is not all that efficient because, again, it's hodgepodge. Things have been added and changed, and so the new kitchen basically will be designed as a totally new and modern kitchen. We will not be reusing any of the existing components, and of course, going back to your previous question, the hoods, the fire suppression system, the fire separation to adjacent spaces will all be handled by Andy Chalmers and the local fire department. So, and that is actually one of the driving motives behind this. Basically, is just to solve some of the problems that we have with deliveries and moving materials from room to room, and sort of improving the efficiency of that.
All right, I invite the board to ask what questions they have, considering the criteria by which we have to run grants, to extent that are not certain things that need to be teased out.
I think the hardship piece, so one of the things we have to talk about is that there's not an unnecessary hardship. So how could, is the reason to go above 35 feet is for aesthetic reasons, to maintain the building with everything else? Are there other reasons besides that?
Well, basically, in this case, first of all, there are practical issues in terms of the cash end of this working. Basically, we need to develop a specific amount of units in order for this to work. If we amortize the cost of the development over, let's say, a half a dozen units as opposed to a dozen, it just doesn't work. So for this to work reasonably and carry itself, we figured out what we needed to accomplish in terms of the amount of units in the development. And as always, when you're doing a hotel type of construction, there's a certain efficiency in going 3 stories. Your footprint, basically amortizing some of your more expensive systems into a footprint it makes for a much more efficient construction cost than if you do a building that's 50 feet wide and 400 feet long. That plus the fact that it gets awful tiresome running up and down that corridor. But there's just an inherent logic in doing this as a 3-story building. In addition to the design, the significant design parameters that we're trying to adhere to as well, in terms of meeting what's already there and having a seamless and attractive addition to what is there.
Are you saying that in order to get an adequate number of units to make this a financially feasible project, you've got to go up that height because you've got to, if you went to 35 feet, you couldn't get the right number of units?
That's correct. Well, let me backtrack. To do what we want to do with the building type that we selected, we could do what we want to do. For instance, if we went to 35 feet and put a flat roof on the building. But again, we're trying to be sensitive to the flavor of the community and to people's expectations. And I somehow suspect that, and I know some of this is outside the purview of the board, but I can't imagine that if Fritz built a block building 35 feet tall with a flat rubber roof on it, that he wouldn't be catching a whole lot of friction. A nice word, friction. from the community. So we've never considered a building type other than the traditional building type that we're trying to emulate, basically.
So would you say part of the hardship is that you got to match the building or it's going to look like?
That is part of it. Not only that, but again, the cost of the alternative building type, for instance, going with the 35-foot building, the structure required to hold up a roof, a completely flat roof, basically, and then to put a ballasted or a rubber membrane on top of it, that puts you into an entirely different building class. And again, the numbers start to get out of control and don't work with the financial model that Fritz has to adhere to. So anything can be done. I would be lying if I said that no, this is the only way that we can build this. But to do something that will meld with the community, work with Fritz's financial constraints, and accomplish everything we have to accomplish. This is the ideal. It's not the only. It certainly is the ideal. And probably likely that some of the other because of cost, some of the other building types just wouldn't be feasible.
You covered fire lane access to the addition. How would a fire truck get to the various pieces of it?
Basically, there would be access pretty much, I'd say 85% of this building.
Can you
I didn't anticipate that question, so I really don't have a complete site plan. It might have been a good thing to do, but I hadn't anticipated the question. But basically, there's a large tree over here, but a fire department could come and do an attack, and there's a road that comes through here around the back and comes around. That's the service road that they bring in the deliveries and so on and so forth. So basically, this entire, not only of the addition, but this side of the building is totally accessible. So all of this, and all of this is accessible, and there might be just a small amount, but on the other hand, the fire hoses and the apparatus would certainly be able to make up that small amount. I did a bit of a fire analysis, basically, when I was looking at whether or not, how do I start? In determining whether I needed to do a complete fire separation between the addition and the main building, basically you're allowed to pick up extra percentages of building type 5A, depending on the amount of surface area that is accessible by the fire truck. So trying to figure out if I needed to separate this building, it became obvious very early on that, in fact, no matter, even if I had complete all the way around access, I would still have to do it. So, but I did the exercise, and that is what we have in terms of protection. It's about 85% of the perimeter.
Do I understand that correctly that those plans or plans for access and showing access and so forth are required under the fire safety code? Those would have to be submitted when this project if it becomes final. That was my impression, but
I don't believe it's required by the present New Hampshire code, which is IBC and the life safety code. On the other hand, your fire chief and his code enforcement officer could certainly approach the selectmen and make that a part of your local building code. You can't ask for less than the state code, but you can ask for more.
It would be helpful for our consideration to see plantings and the complete plat of the property.
We could ask for that, though that and the bodies were going to make a judgment on it. The alternative is to just say it has to be set up, if we do something, make it conditional on Jay's, give them discretion to say.
Jay has commented on the work.
Yes, you saw the letter. But, in terms of any final plans, just say subject to.
I'm not with respect to your question as to the access of.
I mean, we could ask for the plan, but then I wonder what we do with it. I guess that,
I wonder where your question was going.
well, the question was largely getting at the comment Jay made about having access. And I wasn't sure what kind of access this had.
And we still don't.
We still don't know if then it's roughly 85%. But we could decide to ask for that, or we could decide to,
If it were to be approved, we could, as we've done in other cases, make that a condition that the access meet the approval of the fire chief.
We actually had a site plan, we just didn't bring it because we were basically prepared to address the height issue, and we didn't have any building setback issues.
It wasn't something I considered, I was just wondering with respect to your question.
yeah, I guess my concern is,
It's entirely outside the purview of this board as to whether this meets fire code and the access is acceptable. Isn't
I think-
go with what we're saying?
That would be part of the permitting process.
well, I think the argument would be is we first decide what the purpose is of the rate limit. Is it protect the use or is it for
Well, we're
fire
not going to get
safety?
to that yet.
Or both.
We've got people
Yeah,
here
we
for
have.
this.
And if we think it's for fire safety, then certainly we might then
35 feet is statewide, and it refers to the ability of ladders to reach. It has nothing to do with sight lines or.
well, well, somehow we have to decide why it's in the zoning ordinance. And that maybe, I mean, I guess to answer your question, Dave, though, that there is potentially a fire safety rationale for the 35 feet. And if there was, then
Yep.
we'd have we could reasonably have some kind of condition to an approval, including such as no living space within 35 feet to the
Right.
house and other things. But, I mean, if the board wants to ask for a second, I think.
And just as a footnote to that conversation, the uppermost living floor, all of the window sills will certainly be well within that 35-foot limitation. So, the occupied floor will certainly be accessible, in addition to, of course, having all the necessary means of egress as required by New Hampshire State Code. And also being, of course, state-of-the-art construction by 21st century standards, fire standards.
When the Grand Summit, which exceeded the 35 feet, was built, the applicant provided the town with a truck with sufficient ladders to go above the 35 feet.
Are you feeling quite that generous, Chris?
That's all it is with fire safety.
And of course, a new building for the big truck.
I'm just commenting on what the 35 feet is.
Did they have living space above the 35 feet?
Pardon me?
Did they have living space? Did they have the Grand Summit?
No, it's a different issue.
Let's kind of stay
It was
focused here.
just a little story, by the way.
Other questions of the applicant at this point? Okay, then
I say a few
Oh,
things.
well, yeah, again,
I don't know what the protocol
maybe
is.
say a few things, and then we'll listen to any other comments of others. You'll have an opportunity then to rebut anything that's said or say thank you. And we'll be asking questions all along. So if this is not your last chance, go ahead and say what you wish.
Yeah, my name's so many people that are interested in our project, and I want to thank everybody that's here that know what this means to Wentworth. There's a few of my employees here, so thank you. I would like to just address, that hardship issue a little bit, because I think there are two components to it, and I just want to make sure that everybody's absolutely clear, and I will be turning around and showing you what I'm talking here. But this is the 30-foot line, And this is anything, these top windows here where the 30-foot line goes through, none of those rooms are occupied. They used to be, there used to be staff housing, 50, 100 years ago. But
That's in the existing building.
the only thing, on the existing building here, which stops here, this is the new section, this is the old. So on the existing building, the only thing that's happening up here is, this is my office. Okay, and it's a great office. I see the whole of the town every day, and I really love to work up there. So these windows, this is a storage area, this is a storage area. We have some air handlers up there for the air conditioning system. And it's going to be the same over here. It's all going to be supportive of the structure that we're building. The only difference would be that we're planning to put 2 hot tubs in here, because that's the only thing that is overlooking the huge pear tree that's in front of this building. Remember, this is set back, and there's that huge pear tree there, and that's the only thing that's higher than the top of the pear tree, and you get to see the mountains. And the view is absolutely phenomenal. The connection to these hot tubs will be in the interior through some spiral staircases. That's what we're planning, and then the servicing of the hot tubs would come from a secondary egress that you'll be able to get up there somehow. So the staff will come in and go up to the 3rd floor, walk through, not go to the guest room, how they usually do when we have to service hot tubs. So I just wanted to be clear about that. This is the point where the 35-foot line goes, and these windows here, they all represent unoccupied space. These are guest rooms here and here. This line here is guest rooms, and this line is guest rooms. There's nobody above the 2nd, 3rd floor, we call it. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. The hardship I would like to address a little bit, and it's just kind of, I didn't mean to attack you.
That's all right, I'll get even later.
The hardship.
Fritz, I'm sorry, before you go on, you said there was going to be 2 hot tubs in that?
In that turret on top here.
It's going to be above the 35-foot line?
Well, actually, the hot tub will be below, some part of the window. Let me show you again. This is where the hot tubs are going to be. You see these open windows. So the hot tub would not be higher than the sill behind it. So the floor, maybe you can, I would think the floor for this room would start about here.
So there would be people in this room that would be above the 35-foot line now?
That's correct, if they take a hot tub.
So that's
And
different.
they would have a spiral staircase inside.
Because I
from their
understood
room.
it, there was going to be no living space above 35 feet.
Well, I don't think they're gonna live in the hot tub.
But they'll be up there if there was they could be up
Well, there's
there.
gonna be people up there checking on the air handlers and,
But they're all going to be guests up there, above 35 feet.
yes, to enjoy the view. It'd be like a balcony with water.
Okay.
Okay. So we're talking about these 2 areas here. There's going to be hot tubs, but the bottom of the hot tubs is obviously not going to exceed the opening of this is open air window. These hot tubs, they're fairly good sized, and they have like radiant heat, so if the snow comes in or the water goes over and freezes up in winter, that won't happen. So we have about 12 of those now. They're very popular, and that's where the hardship comes in. I want to talk a little bit about that. It affects the operation of the hotel. That's where I feel our hardship is. The hotel has been built 130 years ago, and I just want to go over this a little bit quickly again. This is the new plan. I want to show you as is.
Which?
That's it. you know, this is our laundry room, and you know, maybe this whole thing could be organized better than it has been for the 20 years I've been there. But you always have to segregate your operational departments from the guest. You don't want the guest involved in the workings of a hotel. I think that is rule number one in any hotel of any class. And we have the present kitchen here, and we're going to just make it a little longer, and we're going to connect all this into one building. And that will allow us, you know, for example, the staff bathroom area is here now. If they have to go to wash their hands before service, that's how they have to go, you know. And in winter, I've had a couple of accidents. Actually, there's a little step here that would like to leave there, but you know, people slipping at night, icy, the light isn't that great. We had we have our linen storage here. We send out our linen now to be laundered with a company. This is the only area where we really can keep it when it's dirty and when it's being picked up. So when we have a function in our back dining room, the housekeepers have to go around like this, come into the lobby, and then go upstairs, you know. And I think the average housekeeper probably transports about 100 pounds of laundry a day. And it's really hard work. So in the new thing, we're going to have laundry chutes from the second floor. And from the third floor down into the laundry directly. And we're also going to have, and that's all signed into the new plans, we're going to have some dumb waiters where we can send the laundry up. So that's going to really help our operation. The kitchen, it's going to be in the same location, but our food and wine storage is going to be all inside, which will be immensely helpful. It's all, the kitchen is going to be like this, and then the rooms are going to be on top of that, and then the hot tub is going to be in the very top of that. So the hardship is our hardship is operational, and it has to do also with, you know, the hotel has been there 130 years, so it's not easy to change one thing. You know, you have to follow through on a number of things because everything is so interrelated. And the thought that the building was fine for 130 years with, you know, being 45.9 feet high or you know, 2/3 or 3/3, 2/3, 45 feet and 9 inches. It's been there for a long time, and we just want to give it a brother. You know, we want it to look like it's been there. It's been there for a long time. So if we can't do that, my biggest concern would be the interior. Other than the aesthetics from the exterior, with things not being aligned up, but you won't be able to do it with 35 feet and then not have stairs or steps where the floors connect. And then you have to have 2 maids' closets because you won't be able to roll the trolley from the new section into the old section where the housekeepers keep all their supplies to clean the rooms. And so that is my biggest concern about doing a new building that does not look like the old one from an operational point of view. So I personally think that to have the same look, the same flavor, have it look like it's always been there, will be a much better solution than to live by a law that's been on the books for I don't know how long, and a lot of people are proud that it's never been broken. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to just make one more point on just sort of an addition to what Fritz said. You are charged basically with the responsibility of considering a number of points. One of the points basically is in making your decision, will you be setting a legal precedent? And I wanted to address that for a moment. Fritz has the only,
ZBA decisions don't set
Yeah,
legal
in the
precedent.
interest of moving along,
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure that's.
All right.
we can do that. And we agree there's no precedent.
There isn't.
setting in any action we do, not just this one. We have a chance to speak again. I wanted to, before I ask for other comments, I wanted to note that we do have letters received from the Wentworth Resort Condominium Association that is supportive of the project, from the Jackson Historical Society and the Jackson Old Library Trust. These are all on the town website if you want to see them. There's also been a series of email correspondence between myself and the fire chief and the Dick Bennett Planning Board that is also been posted on the town website. The fire, Jay notes, I guess that it's fair to characterize as supportive, but very interested in having adequate access and water supply to the building. But suggest that might be able to be done during the construction process. So I'll leave it at that. Now, unless,
Can I get
go ahead.
Just let me get back to the hardship issue for a second, see if I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. See if I can just summarize what I think you're saying, tell me if I've got it right or not. The hardship is that if you did it at 35 feet, because of differences in floor heights and so forth, it makes your operations less efficient. Makes it more difficult for your people to service the building. The other thing is that if you did it at 35 feet, the construction cost would most probably be fairly significantly higher. If you did it at 35 feet, well, Claude feels that would be perhaps a possibility, although more expensive. Aesthetically, the building wouldn't be what it is today. And from a hardship standpoint, that makes your property less attractive to guests. Would that summarize the hardships? Is there something I missed?
Well, I definitely would be interested to build it less than 35 feet, not make it matching. I think it will look like the little brother that was enough to solve, you know. I don't think it would look right. It just, I just can't visualize it. That's all, you know. So it's not, for me, it's not been a money issue, and I certainly would never, ever, under any circumstances, build a building that would have a flat roof next to the hotel. Okay, I'm sorry. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Okay, now I would like any of or anybody else with direct interest who might wish to offer any commentary, either in support or against this. And if you speak, can you stand and identify yourself so Martha here can get your name?
Could I be shown to have an interest as a long-term employee? Would that give me a potential employee going out into the future as having an interest in this? Give me the
I suppose that's a financial interest. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, as such. My own name
I'm
is
sorry, your name?
Tony Betts, longtime Jackson resident, and I'd like to mention that the design, as this is planned, is going to enable hallways without small steps in them and various ways of going from one area to another that will eliminate small rises. And for elderly people going down hallways where you have rises or access from one part of the building to another, if you can eliminate changes in the level, it's much safer. Or for example, if you're doing the room service with the tray and so forth, and you have to step up a couple of feet or a foot or two with these types of things, there's a certain safety issue there. So the design as it's called for here will eliminate these changes in the surface that both guests and employees would have to traverse. And if my understanding of the architectural layout is correct, that's a positive reason to let him do it as such. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you.
In the back, I'm sorry, I can't.
Wayne Peterson. I have a couple of comments here.
What's this?
Are you a butter or?
No, I have an interest as a member of the town now.
Do you have?
And the influence that this decision might have on other decisions that might come before the board.
This doesn't establish precedence, so I don't think it would.
We got captured that statement in the meeting.
Sorry?
You captured that statement in the minutes of the meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that's, I think that's, for everything the Board of Adjustment does is done on a case-by-case basis. There's no precedence established.
It's in the state guide
Yeah.
to the boards, adjustment boards all across the state. It says clearly, nothing decided sets a precedent.
And I'm sorry, and I'm trying I am part of, I am charged with trying to keep the commentary to people with direct interest. So I don't mean to ask you not to speak, but clearly it's people who, and I should add the selectmen, I noticed there's one selectman here who certainly are welcome to speak. Because these are all the people who, if we, depending on how we rule, also have standing to move for a rehearing or to appeal.
Frank,
I suppose you're...
no, I have no direct interest, but I did want to, with your permission, I wanted to clarify something Jerry said, but after shooting him down.
Yes. I'd like to clarify some things too, because apparently...
Well, what he said was complete in error, so.
Yeah, well, we got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be overruled, but I'm trying to maintain...
His comment about the height limitation throughout the state being 35 feet, I think.
No.
No?
Okay.
Something else you said that I...
Well, it relates only to fire safety, not to fuel lines. You know that as an insurance person.
That's what I have to ask for.
Any other commentary on others or anybody else? Okay. You have, what I'd like to suggest is we leave the hearing open so we can decide if it's necessary to continue it while we deliberate. I'll give Fritz one more opportunity to speak, and then let's start discussing it, if that's okay with everybody.
Okay. Me?
You have...
Yeah, I just would like to raise one more point, and that is Jackson is a seasonal resort area, and we have windows of opportunity to do construction. I have done, I've renovated all of the cottages other than the Wildwood. They've all been totally rebuilt on the inside. And we've accomplished all these constructions between late October and June, including the fair lawn, which required that we move the building 9 feet south and 3 feet west at a cost of $65,000. So that we're a little less non-conforming, and we were fine with that. Okay, it's not something that made me sleep a lot better, but we were okay with it. If that's what he wanted. But here I'm concerned. We would like to start construction on November 4th and have completed by July 31st. And the reason for that is we're really busy August, September, October, November. October, and then obviously Christmas, New Year's. But if we can't do it that time, then we would really get into serious displacement of business. and that I can't afford. So if the decision gets delayed, that's okay, but there is a point where we just have to say, well, it's too late. Also, we've been holding off business. You know, as you probably know, we do a lot of weddings, and weddings are not booked, you know, today for tomorrow. We already have about 10 weddings on the books for next year, but we purposely have hold off to do some of these weddings in May and in June, that you know, we're able to move them into later dates. But we now get into the area where we start to fill up and have to know whether we're going to go ahead with this or not. So I just hope that you enter that thing into your decision-making process as well. And thank you for your consideration.
Is there anybody from representing the Wentworth Resort Condominium Association here? Okay. I was going to ask what they thought of building values, but property values in there.
Certainly not going to reduce the property value.
Sorry?
I say certainly not going to have a negative.
Rationale for a special condition, rather than just the size of the lot.
Well, is there anything that tells us that that the building in any fashion can't be considered as a special condition of the
Well,
law?
I think that was my point. The case, the hotel case Parade versus City of Portsmouth, justified a very large parapet sign, for which they sought a variance. And what was special about that situation was the size of the hotel.
So you didn't want to put a tiny parapet on a big hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's.
And that was commented on. Actually, it's in your panel. It was commented on, as that's kind of the first time. The court suggested that buildings, as opposed to the lot alone, is a driver of a special condition.
One of the things that I would add is, in looking at this, there was a Harrington case. And Harrington said that basically, if you're unable to earn a good return on your investment, that is considered a special condition and a hardship. So if wedding business is being lost, if people are going to a Holiday Inn because they've got hot tubs, to me that's a loss of ability to earn money on your investment.
What page is that?
It's part of the new, it's the changes in 2012. And it's 2-15.
What do we want the people to help?
And it went on, yes, and basically that was established a while ago. It went on to say that you really need to show no actual proof that you're not getting an ROI because you wouldn't be allowed to do this. So those are the two things that I think impact this. Is I think that there's a potential for losing business because you don't have some of the amenities that these chain hotels have, and I think that's a return on investment issue.
So then if we do have a special condition, then the issue becomes whether or not his loss, whether or not the public benefit from which
This is a
hardship.
This is a hardship.
This is a hardship, but then you have to have public benefit all the way.
If we look at the 35 feet and we say, well, the 35 feet is a fire issue because of ladders, et cetera, we could do that. We could also look at the master plan and see that the preservation of the village atmosphere is important. Perhaps the 35 feet has something to do with that, and we don't really know because there's no backup, there's no information about what was the thought when they put up 35 feet. But if it's fire safety, we have a situation where we have a completely fully sprinkled building and alarmed, and we have the fire chief saying, you know, he thinks the project is not a problem. To, and certainly he's concerned about public safety, as we're concerned about public safety. The areas where anybody will be are reachable by the 35-foot ladder if the sprinkler system failed or, whatever.
If I can jump in, one of the things it says in the manual is interpretation of codes, interpretation of that kind of stuff is not within the purview of this board. That's up to, we go to the fire chief and say, hey, it's up to you to determine this. It's not up to us.
Well, it's up to us to decide whether we think the hardship that would be suffered is significant in relation to the benefit to the public of strict enforcement of the code. And what I'm saying is that under the circumstances, if it's fire safety, it doesn't seem that the benefit of the public of enforcing a 35-foot height limitation on that particular building under these particular circumstances outweighs the hardship of either not being able to build a thing, not having the business that he would like to have, not having corridors that tie, or having to spend a significantly higher amount of money to build a building just to stay within the 35 feet. So I'm saying that it would seem to me, under these circumstances, that the hardship outweighs the public benefit of strict enforcement of that particular code.
I think that's the heart of the case we have to decide, is that balancing.
I agree.
The master plan also asks that non-conforming properties not be made more non-conforming, but become more conforming.
Yeah, yes, it does.
And every variance we grant makes something more non-conforming.
That's why they ask for a
I
variance.
stated reference to the master plan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. And, in theory, well, not in theory, in practice, we are told to look to the master plan to understand why certain zoning requirements exist. Unfortunately, our master plan doesn't explicitly address this. It does mention fire safety, it does mention views, and it does mention preserving the small town nature of the village. All three presumably may have some connection to the 35 feet, maybe all three do.
I think on the other hand, Wentworth has been a center of Jackson for ever, and not just a center, but also an economic center.
Absolutely.
To go along with that idea of being the center, if I could just add one thing about hardship, and it does go back to historical, but on the front door of the place it says National Historical Register. To put anything other than what is already there sort of violates the letter of what the Historical Commission of the State of New Hampshire is trying to do.
Again, I would argue that we don't interpret that.
But it's a hardship.
We don't interpret that, though.
But it's a hardship, and I think it's one that was
Well,
brought up today.
I would also
Say it
point out-
differently then, yeah.
I would also point out that when those buildings were placed on the register, it was made very clear that being placed on the register as they were didn't prohibit anybody from doing anything with them.
Okay.
It was simply a designation, which at the time it was thought might make it easier for them to get money to do work because they were on the register. We had a big debate about that at Town Hall, perhaps.
My only
people
point is that I
recall.
think it'd be a dreadful hardship to the town to see something really funny sticking on the end that was 35 feet as opposed to what they want to do. That's my only point.
Did you do any drawings meeting the 35 feet?
Never did.
Now, if you met the 35 feet, I think I said this before, let me say it one more time. If you met the 35 feet, then you wouldn't have 3 stories.
That's correct.
You'd have 2 stories, and you wouldn't have the rooms that seem to be necessary.
Or a different, you know, we
Or,
have
yeah, or
more, a bigger footprint basically, and, you know, encroachment into the greens and, you know.
well, and you might not be able to get a, you know, maybe then you'd be looking for a variance to cover distances or something.
Other comments?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one other comment. I know you told me to be quiet before, but I would like to know specifically where it says in your bylaws that only abutters and those with a vested interest have the option to comment. I'm reading from your bylaws right here. It says, order of speakers shall be as follows. Applicant, those in favor, those in opposition. Rebuttal by applicant and those in favor, rebuttal by those in opposition. And it does not say anywhere that it is limited to abutters. And so I would like to know specifically where it is you're generating the gag order on the rest of us.
Is the objection?
It's in our state.
It's in the manual put out by the state, it's got to find it.
The answer
So it's not in your bylaws, it's something that you're following.
It's the
It's
state.
state.
It's the state
is, it's a
establishes.
state law.
Not everybody can speak to everything. You have to have standing, and
Seems like your bylaws might want to reflect that.
that would be a good idea.
I'm, given your view, I mean, if you wish to make a very brief statement, please go ahead.
Sure, I'll say a couple of things. One related to fire signs, which some of you may not have a real concrete grasp on. My impression seems to be that this whole preoccupation with the 35-foot thing is to get a ladder to a window to get out, you know, some person and their small child, and it's not really that. You need to access the roof, right? You need to access the whole structure in order to properly attack a fire and ventilate a fire. Look at Mr. Mallow's building, which was, like you would build yours, modern, sprinkled, all the finest construction, right? But it still has burnable materials in non-occupied spaces, and those catch on fire. And you need to access the roof, and you need to ventilate through the roof in order to address that fire, right? If you can't get a ladder up there, then you can't ventilate, right? Second item, then I'll make it short, right? There's a lot of trees, right? Do the trees help or do the trees hinder, right? I've heard talk about all the trees and the screening and how there's no public detriment, right? Well, if there's all those trees, then what does it matter if it's a flat roof because nobody can see it because there's all those trees, right? If there's all those trees, then you can't get North Conway's ladder truck in there because you can't get from the road up through the trees to the roof. So, a couple of points to consider.
Okay, can I talk about these points?
Very briefly, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah. You know how the main building is located. I mean, you'll be able to get a fire truck in front of the main building. You won't be able to get one in the back unless you move some rocks and some shrubbery and some bush or some trees. So you can access it from the east side, you can't access it from the west side or from, well, you can access it from Main Street. Okay. The other building, I wish I had a plot plan here, but this William Bates Drive, that comes behind the Arden building, behind the hotel. And you're going to be able to drive the truck right in there. In addition to this, and that comes to about what's combustible upstairs, we now have 22 rooms on 2 floors with 2 egresses. We will have 16 rooms on each floor with 3 egresses. Okay, so the building is going to be much safer, I think, and far more operational for in case of fire than it is now.
Okay. Do we have other commentary at this point from board questions?
I don't need any more comment.
I mean, I think the jury has, I mean, it sounds like there's, core support for this. Jerry has made the comment that we should either ask for a plot plan or I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you
Actually, I was really relating to your question
Yeah.
as to what the access requirement. I think that the plot plan would be more the purview of the code enforcement officer.
Yeah, I mean,
I would-
my sense is that I would perhaps attach as a condition or requirement.
Yeah, if we were to allow it, attach it as a condition.
Yeah, that the fire chief and the building inspector be totally satisfied with access, including to the effect of necessary removing trees.
Was that your question was
Yeah.
unsatisfactory answer.
Okay,
You want to go through the
yes.
criteria?
Okay. Well, I think at this point then, I think well, let me leave the hearing open just in case. Okay, so the first item to consider is whether or not it's contrary to the public interest or the spirit of the ordinance is being observed. And in particular, it suggested that we should ask, is the variance, whether the variance altered the essential character of this neighborhood and if the variance threatened public safety or welfare.
Well, it certainly doesn't alter the character of the neighborhood. We all agree on that?
Yes, in fact, I think I'd argue it probably improves it.
It certainly doesn't hurt it.
I'm not sure it improves it, it just doesn't change it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a little bit of feeling of inconsistency with the spirit of the ordinance, and the ordinance is 35 feet for the fire purpose. I think that the fire chief's comment to that is somewhat satisfying to me, that he recognizes that it's above the capability. I understand full well what the gentleman in the back spoke about, having to access the roof for ventilation. Those are facts that exist. But I'm not an expert on it, I'll have to accept what Jay says. But the spirit of the ordinance is,
Fire safety,
yeah,
yeah, or viewers,
Forest.
whatever. But certainly we'd agree fire safety, and we have a written letter from the fire chief saying, I think it's fine.
with some restrictions.
With some restrictions on the...
Yeah, right, he wants to see access and he wants
Yeah.
adequate water, and we can put that in.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask for a vote in which we make the finding that we agree that this does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And the second is we make a finding that this variance, with whatever suitable conditions we apply, does not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Did everybody vote yes? Okay. That's yes. Okay, the third criteria,
And that's with the conditions.
With conditions.
yes, presuming we will have a condition that, in my view, somehow, says Jay and Andy are satisfied. And I would, in that condition, be fairly, make sure that they understood that if they felt a new road had to be, accessed back end, that
It would be, it would probably be Jay and Woody.
The fire.
Because he's the fire
Yeah.
inspector. He's the fire inspector.
And I suppose we need to discuss whether or not we have concern, as a fire safety, we have concern about the hot tubs above 35 feet. Or at least there's what one might consider to be living space, or occupant space above 35 feet.
I had only brought that up because in your emails with Jay, you said that there was no livable space.
Yes.
And I interpreted that there was no reason for any guests to be up there other than,
And that was my understanding at the time.
so that's why I maybe would like I felt very comfortable with Jay giving the approval, but then to find out that my interpretation now that it's going to be guests there, I guess I would like to hear, that kind of changes my perspective on it, and if Jay was still comfortable with that.
Jay, the information about the hot tubs came up after that email exchange.
And the egress from that is a spiral staircase.
Yes, and that's certainly, though I think, I understand, there's also egress. That's correct. Through the attic into the other building. That would be, I think most
That
guests
would be the
go
second
there.
means of egress.
And just that's something Jay has to consider.
Yeah, so I guess I would, I think there, I'd probably defer again to Jay and say, if he and actually, the fire marshal, and I think at that point also Andy, feel that they should not be there, we can give them that authority to say no. Would that satisfy people?
I think all that needs to be said is that our only condition is that those people approve this, say they're satisfied.
Well, approve those particular issues.
Yeah. Approve the whole concept and the details of the
I think it's fair
concept.
to know our concern.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, third test is whether or not, substantial justice is done. And this, again, is, loss of an individual is not a way to a gain by the general public, is injustice.
And it's something never been defined.
Yeah, that's pretty vague, and we've kind of, I think already, let me at least ask for a vote that we agree that in granting the variance, substantial justice is done. All in favor? Next test, the values of surrounding property are not diminished. We've heard no testimony that they are, and we actually have a letter from the condo association supporting it.
And also the historical society.
The historical society. So I move that we find that the value of the surrounding properties will not be diminished if we grant this variance.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then lastly, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship, meaning owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from others in the area. There is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to this property.
I think we discussed that.
Yeah.
And any further discussion on that? We have a motion that we find that literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so unanimous.
Can I ask just a question, just for my information?
I abstain from that, so I'm not
I'm
gonna,
sorry?
I'm gonna abstain from that.
Okay,
In
so
that
it's 4-0-1.
Okay. Is the sprinkler system that's going in the building, is it a life safety system, or is it a complete sprinkler system?
I don't believe that a 13R system would be allowable for this occupancy and this height of a building. I suspect the answer is it would have to be a full NFPA 13 system. 13R is allowed in specific applications, but I don't think this one would meet any of those triggers.
Thank you.
So before we vote on granting the variance, I'd like to just make sure we're clear on what the condition or conditions are that we would attach. Would somebody like to try to state what they are?
I think they refer entirely to the fire safety issue. And I think the occupied space above the 35 feet needs to be understood by the fire chief and the fire marshal, and that they're satisfied with public safety being met.
Yeah, we could say that. We could say that the condition could be that the fire chief and fire marshal are satisfied as to access and water, which they expressed concern about.
Fire lanes and
Right,
water.
and water, and that they're satisfied with the protection afforded in the hot tub area, given the sprinkler system and the means of egress.
Okay. And I'd add that, I mean, that subject to anything that is reasonable in their sole discretion. That they have the power to say, no hot tub, for example.
Well, if they thought the protection wasn't adequate, they'd say, we don't think it's adequate.
Or just no, not accessible to guests, period.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the word reasonable, how would you include that?
I guess I wouldn't, I'd say in their sole discretion.
But just to make a comment, this young man was making the points of, accessibility to the roof, making that particular note they should look
That
at.
was the fire lane issue, I think.
Well, no, accessibility to the roof, actually physically getting on, making the hole in the roof. I mean, that was his point. And it's well taken, and they make that a specific, we address that, or we ask them to address it, we don't address it.
That's addressed by the fact that other towns have ladders that reach well above 35 feet, which Jay alluded to. Didn't he allude to that in his
Yes.
note? That, but, we only have 35 feet, but, Conway has more, and North Conway
Right,
has
but
more.
in that 10 minutes before they get here, how is he going to address it?
You're not
But
going,
Jay's letter was addressed because it was fully sprinkled.
but because it's fully sprinkled, because you're not going to get the ability of Jackson's Fire Department to get above 35 feet under that roof. It's not going to happen. So the thought is that because it's sprinkled, that's less of a problem, and our fire chief doesn't think it's a problem. So,
Okay. I think I need to write that up. I think I understand it. So I would then ask that I move that we grant variance, subject to the condition of it being approved, subject to fire lanes and occupancy above 35 feet in the hot tubs, and being acceptable in the sole discretion of the fire chief, fire marshal, and I guess I'd add building inspector if you want. So with those conditions, would somebody like to second that motion? Second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Is that everybody?
Yes, I will.
Okay, so that's 5-0. Okay, so we've granted the variance. I will write up a decision. Publish it, I'm sorry? Yes, I thank you. I'll now close the public hearing, which means we know the testimony. Please sit down, I'm not finished yet. I have an obligation to publish a decision within 5 days. I will advise you that any abutter, any other interested party, or the selectman can move for a rehearing by pointing out either new evidence that was not considered here, or we made some sort of error in our discussions. They have 30 days to file that. That's also necessary if, it's also necessary for somebody to go through that process if they were to appeal this to Superior Court. So I think the operative thing is you should see some sort of decision published, probably very early next week, depending on how busy my weekend is. And then basically good to go, but you have that risk of somebody raising their hand during that 30-day period. If somebody does move for a rehearing, the board then meets and decides whether or not to accept that motion. And if we accept that motion, that means we start all over from ground zero, with new public notices and everything. So it's really an opportunity for us to correct a mistake, or if there's some kind of compelling evidence. With that, I'll say that I am aware of no other variances or other things coming toward us, so I don't expect we'll have a meeting next month, or in the foreseeable future. So I'll take the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get out now?